Mexico, a country full of history. Between several periods, some better than others, let's talk about one of the most important. The stabilizer development. It was a political and economic period between the end of the 50s and the beginning of the 70s. It is recognized because of high production growth, low inflation rate, and exchange rate stability. Let's talk about three main characters of this period. First, Adolfo Ruiz Cortines. He was president of Mexico between 1952 to 1958. He gave the right to vote to women. He managed an austerity policy by reducing public spending. He also granted education subsidies and boosted health insurance for all. He also reduced corruption and monopolies. And after him, there was Adolfo López Mateos, who took the presidency between 1958 to 1964. He contributed by the creation of a health system for federal workers, boosted the construction of cultural and educational places, and distributed books for public schools. He also took care of the inflation rate. Also, he took care of workers by establishing a bonus payment called aguinaldo. Then, the last president of this period, Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. Díaz Ordaz policies allowed high growth in exports of Mexican agricultural products. He was in charge of the signing of the Tlatelolco Treaty. This treaty proposed the prohibition of nuclear weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean. His conservative economic policies were based on a subsidy investment strategy in the states that performed best socially and economically. Before being president, he promoted the election of Mexico as the setting for the Olympic Games, and it was during his presidency that this happened. He was recognized by his excellent foreign policies. Meanwhile, this period, some significant international events happened. The freedom of Vietnam, the polio vaccine, the Suez War, the space race, and the Castro Revolution. There was also the first perspective of an interconnected global community. There was the murder of John F. Kennedy, the Russian repression of Czechoslovakia, some accidents with nuclear weapons, and Apollo places the first man on the surface of the moon. But Mexico is still growing at the inside. So let's hear some of the positive effects of this period.
Economic growth. The country becomes an industrialized nation. The number of industrial companies increased. Internal consumption is boosted. Education, health, and social security improves. Brings political stability to the country. Conflict decreased. The government increases investment in public banking and ensures better access to social benefits. Support were granted to those interested in opening businesses. The model allowed an expansion of internal markets and price control, benefiting the lower classes.
But not everything was as good as it seemed. There were also negative effects.
In 1970, signs of fatigue begin, and then in 1973, unemployment begins to grow, debt increases, and private investment decreases. Exportation begins to decrease. The primary sector is postponed against the tertiary, and that slows production because the industry does not work without raw material. Then, lack of investment in new technologies is a problem, and instead of boosting research, rulers buy technology abroad.
There were also certain sectors that were more benefit than others at this period. Let's hear about them.
At the end of the 60s, the secondary sector employed more than one-fifth of the labor force in the industry, and the manufacturing sector represents more than 60% of the labor force, thereby being the fastest growing sector. 50% of the industrial plants we are establishing in the capital of the Republic. as are the chemical industry of metal, mechanical, paper, drug producer, textiles, and more. The secondary industry was growing because the hydrocarbons, plastic, textile industry, energy production had all its origin in oil. The primary sector was also very benefited by the production of the agricultural sector such as coffee, cotton, sugar began to do very well, so there were more exports.
In conclusion, I think that the Mexican miracle was both positive and negative for us. All kinds of change have effects that help within the growth of the country, but you cannot avoid all the problems that come within bringing new ways. But in the end, it helped in the aspect of growth and development of our country.
In conclusion, I think very positive aspect the Mexican miracle because it helped the economy of our country a lot, and thanks to this situation we were able to export agriculture and we became a better known country. Another big benefit that happened was that I left the bonus for the Mexican worker today.
Well, the Mexican miracle was a good economic period, but it needed to be with a multidimensional perspective to continue growing as a good period. It was also good because they had really strict policies that needed to be fulfilled and that they did. But of course, as it needed a balance and someone taking care of every sector, it wouldn't work that much time.